Caitlin Clark just told the Indiana Fever front office they couldn't cut 2 players, and they actually listened. Think about that for a second. A second-year player just overruled management decisions that were already made. This isn't just about keeping teammates around. This is about power, control, and how one person is literally rewriting the rules of an entire league. And what happened behind closed doors is going to blow your mind. Here's what you need to know. The Indiana Fever were planning their off-season moves. Normal stuff, right? Teams do this every year. They evaluate who stays, who goes, who fits the system. But this time, something different happened. Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull were both on the chopping block. These aren't random bench players. These are established WNBA athletes with real careers and real value. The front office had made their decision. Papers were probably being drawn up. Agents were likely getting calls. This was happening. Then Caitlin Clark stepped in and said no. Not just a suggestion, not just a casual comment in a meeting. She made it clear these players needed to stay. And here's the crazy part. The Fever listened. They completely changed their plans. They kept both players. A rookie, barely into her second season, just changed franchise decisions that executive teams spend months planning. When does that ever happen in professional sports? Let's talk about what this really means, because most people are missing the bigger picture here. Caitlin Clark isn't just a good basketball player. She's not just someone who fills seats or sells jerseys. She's become something the WNBA has never really seen before. She's a franchise cornerstone with actual organizational power. We're talking LeBron James level influence. We're talking Tom Brady calling personnel shots. That kind of power. In the WNBA, this is unheard of. Players don't get this kind of say, especially not this early in their careers. Think about what the Fever were planning to do. Sophie Cunningham is a veteran guard who brings experience and toughness. She's played meaningful games. She knows how to handle pressure. She's been in playoff situations. That's valuable. Lexie Hull is a sharpshooter who can space the floor and hit big shots when you need them. She's also someone who fits the modern style of basketball perfectly. 3-point shooting, off-ball movement, defensive versatility. These aren't players you just throw away without thinking twice, but front offices make these decisions all the time. Cap space matters. Future draft picks matter. Long-term planning matters. Teams cut good players constantly because they think they can find better fits or cheaper options. This is professional sports. It's a business. Emotions aren't supposed to factor in. The best move on paper is the move you make, even if it hurts. That's how every team operates. Except this time, the Indiana Fever didn't operate that way. They didn't make the business decision. They made the Caitlin Clark decision. And here's why that matters so much. Clark didn't just want these players around because they're friends. That's what some people think. They see this as a young player being emotional or not understanding the business side. That's completely wrong. Caitlin Clark is one of the smartest basketball minds in the game right now. She sees things other players don't see. She understands chemistry. She understands what makes a team work beyond just talent on paper. When she said these players need to stay, it wasn't about feelings. It was about winning. Sophie Cunningham brings something you can't measure in stats. She brings an edge. She gets under opponents' skin. She makes teams uncomfortable. That matters in playoff series. That matters when games get physical and refs let things slide. You need players who don't back down. You need players who set the tone. Cunningham does that. Clark knows that. The front office was about to let that walk away because maybe they thought they could replace it. They were wrong, and Clark knew it. Lexie Hull is different, but equally important. She's a player who makes everyone around her better. Her spacing creates driving lanes for Clark. Her shooting opens up offensive sets. Her movement without the ball keeps defenses honest. When you have a player like Caitlin Clark who draws so much attention, you need players who can make teams pay for overcommitting. Hull does that. She doesn't need the ball to be effective. She doesn't need plays called for her. She just makes winning plays. Those players are harder to find than people think. The Fever front office was looking at this from a different angle. They probably saw the salary numbers. They probably saw other players available in free agency or the draft. They probably had analytics that said they could build a better roster by making changes. On paper, their plan might have made sense. But basketball isn't played on paper. It's played on the court with real people who have real relationships and real chemistry. Clark understood that. Management didn't, until she made them understand. Now, let's talk about what happened when Clark made her position clear. This wasn't a public statement. This wasn't a press conference or social media post. This was behind closed doors. This was in meetings that most people will never hear about. But word gets out. It always does. And what got out was that Caitlin Clark drew a line in the sand. She told the organization these players need to be part of the future. And she made it clear enough that the Fever changed course completely. That takes real power. That takes real influence. You can't just be a good player and have that kind of impact. You need to be someone the organization can't afford to upset. You need to be someone whose opinion matters more than the opinions of people who've been in front offices for decades. Caitlin Clark is that person now. At barely past her rookie season, she's that person. That's insane. The ripple effects of this are huge. First, every other player in the league is watching. They're seeing what's possible. They're seeing that player empowerment can exist in the WNBA the same way it exists in the NBA. For years, WNBA players have had less leverage, less influence, less control over their situations. That's changing. Caitlin Clark is proving it can change. Other stars are taking notes. Other franchises are taking notes too. Second, this changes how teams build around superstars. If your franchise player has this much say in personnel decisions, you have to involve them earlier in the process. You have to get their input before you make moves. You have to treat them like partners, not just employees. Some teams will embrace that. Some teams will resist it. But it's happening whether they like it or not. The Indiana Fever just showed everyone how this works now. Third, this impacts how free agents view the Fever. Players want to go where they are valued. Players want to go where they can win. But they also want to go where the culture is right. When you see a franchise listening to their star player and keeping a team together because of chemistry and fit, that sends a message. That says this organization cares about more than just the bottom line. That says they're committed to building something real. Free agents notice that. The decision to keep Cunningham and Hull also says something about the type of team Clark wants to build. She's not looking for the most talented roster on paper. She's looking for the right mix of talent, toughness, and trust. She's looking for players who buy into a system and play for each other. That's how championships happen. That's how dynasties get built. Clark is thinking long-term. She's thinking about sustained success, not just one good season. And let's be real about something else. If this move fails, if the Fever don't make the playoffs or don't improve next season, guess who gets blamed? Not just the front office. Caitlin Clark will take heat too. She put her name on this decision. She made it clear these players needed to stay. If it doesn't work out, that's on her. That's the risk you take when you have this much influence. But Clark isn't afraid of that risk. She believes in her evaluation. She believes in these players. That's confidence you can't teach. There's also a deeper story here about loyalty. In professional sports, loyalty is rare. Players get traded, coaches get fired, front offices make cold business decisions. It's just how things work. But Caitlin Clark is showing a different way. She's showing that loyalty matters. She's showing that keeping good people around and building something together can be more valuable than constantly chasing upgrades. That's refreshing. That's different. That's the kind of leadership that defines careers. Sophie Cunningham has been in this league for years. She's bounced around. She's been on different teams. She knows what it's like when organizations don't value you. Having a superstar like Clark go to bat for you, that means something. That creates loyalty in return. That creates a bond that shows up in big moments. When the game is on the line and you need someone to make a play, those bonds matter. Clark is building that. She's building a team that will fight for each other because they know they fight for each other off the court too. Lexie. Hull is earlier in her career, but she's already proven she can contribute at a high level. She was a key part of what the Fever did last season. She hit big shots. She played solid defense. She did all the little things that don't show up in highlight reels but show up in wins. Clark saw that. Clark valued that. And Clark made sure the organization valued it too. That's the kind of recognition that makes players run through walls for you. Now think about what this means for the rest of the WNBA. Other teams are watching the Fever. They're watching how this organization operates. They're watching how much power Caitlin Clark has. Some teams are probably jealous. Some teams probably think the Fever are making a mistake. But every team is paying attention. And the smart ones are asking themselves if they'd do the same thing if they had a player like Clark. The answer for most of them should be yes, but not all of them will see it that way. Player empowerment has been a huge topic in the NBA for the last decade. LeBron James changed teams and built super teams. Players started demanding trades and forcing their way to specific destinations. Front offices had to adapt. Some handled it well, some handled it terribly. The WNBA is entering that era now. Caitlin Clark is leading the way. The Fever are showing how a franchise can work with their star instead of against them. Other teams need to learn from this. There's also something important about timing here. This happened during the offseason when decisions are being made. Clark didn't wait until training camp. She didn't wait until the season started. She addressed this immediately when she found out the plans. That's smart. That's strategic. She gave the organization time to adjust and make it work. She didn't back them into a corner publicly. She handled it professionally, but firmly. That's how you build real influence. The front office deserves credit, too. They could have ignored Clark. They could have said she's too young or doesn't understand the business side. They could have made the moves anyway and dealt with the fallout. But they didn't. They listened. They adjusted. They recognized that keeping their franchise player happy is more important than whatever their original plan was. That takes humility. That takes wisdom. Not every front office has that. This decision also impacts how the Fever approach the draft and free agency. They now have a clearer picture of what their core looks like. They know Clark, Cunningham, and Hull are part of the foundation. They can build around that. They can target specific types of players who fit with that group. That focus is valuable. Teams that constantly blow things up and start over rarely succeed. Teams that build around a core and add pieces strategically are the ones that win championships. The chemistry between Clark, Cunningham, and Hull is real. You can see it on the court. They know where each other are going to be. They trust each other. They play with confidence because they know their teammates have their back. That's not something you can create overnight. That takes time. That takes reps. That takes shared experiences. The Fever would have thrown all of that away if they'd made these cuts. Clark saved them from that mistake. Another angle that people aren't talking about enough is what this does for Clark's legacy. She's already one of the most popular players in WNBA history. She's already changed the conversation around women's basketball. But now she's showing she can lead off the court too. She's showing she can shape an organization. She's showing she's more than just a scorer or a playmaker. She's a leader in every sense of the word. That matters. When people look back on her career decades from now, the pressure on the Fever just increased dramatically. They have to win now. They can't waste this. They have a generational talent who's willing to use her influence to build something special. They have players who are loyal and committed. They have chemistry and culture. If they don't turn this into playoff success and eventually a championship, that's a massive failure. The pieces are there. The leadership is there. Now it's about execution. Caitlin Clark betting on Sophie Cunningham and Lexie Hull is also a statement about her basketball IQ. She's not chasing names. She's not chasing all-stars who might not fit. She's valuing the players who make winning basketball happen. That's mature. That's smart. A lot of young stars don't figure that out until years into their careers. Clark already gets it. That's why she's different. That's why she's special. This story is also bigger than just 3 players. It's about the evolution of the WNBA. The league is growing. The talent is increasing. The visibility is higher than ever. With that growth comes change. With that change comes power shifts. Players are gaining more leverage. Stars are gaining more influence. Caitlin Clark is at the forefront of that movement. What she's doing in Indiana is going to influence how the entire league operates moving forward. Front offices across the WNBA are probably having meetings right now about how to handle their own stars. Do they give them more input? Do they involve them in decisions earlier? Do they risk upsetting their franchise player by making moves without their blessing? These are new questions for a lot of teams. The Indiana Fever just showed one way to handle it. Whether other teams follow that model remains to be seen. The fact that this all stayed relatively quiet until decisions were made shows how professionally everyone handled it. There were no leaks. There was no drama. There were no public fights. Clark made her position known privately. The front office responded privately. Then the moves, or non-moves, were made. That's how it should work. That's how you build a healthy organization. Drama and public disputes hurt everyone. The Fever avoided all of that. Looking ahead, the pressure is now on Clark and these players to deliver. The Fever made a commitment. They kept the team together. They listened to their star. Now that team has to win. They have to make the playoffs. They have to compete for a championship. Anything less, and people will question whether this was the right move. But if they succeed, if they build something special, this decision will be remembered as a turning point. The Indiana Fever just proved that in modern sports, your best players aren't just employees. They're partners. They're voices that need to be heard. They're people whose opinions should shape decisions. Caitlin Clark demanded that respect. She earned that respect. And the Fever were smart enough to give it to her. That's how you build a championship culture. That's how you keep a superstar happy. That's how you win in today's WNBA. This is just the beginning of Caitlin Clark's influence. She's not even in her prime yet. She's going to get better. She's going to win more, and she's going to have even more power. The question is how she uses it. If this decision works out, she'll have even more credibility. She'll be able to shape this franchise for years to come. The Indiana Fever might have just handed the keys to their future to a 22-year-old, and honestly, that might be the smartest thing they've ever done. If you want to see what happens next with Caitlin Clark and the Fever, hit that subscribe button.